Millionaire Evicts single mother from his apartment. Because of late rent. Right after she left, he inspected the apartment. And what he found afterwards changed everything. Subscribe to the channel to follow more exciting stories like this one. The morning sun cast long shadows across the polished marble floor of Maxwell Properties headquarters in downtown Boston. Alexander Maxwell, 32, stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, absently adjusting his perfectly knotted tie while reviewing the day's agenda on his tablet. The real estate market had been particularly challenging lately, but challenges were what Alex lived for. Another property showing signs of defaulting. His father's voice interrupted his thoughts. Richard Maxwell, a distinguished man in his early 60s, entered the office with a tablet in hand, his silver hair catching the morning light. The Lawrence Street building, Unit 4B. Alex's jaw tightened imperceptibly. The single mother? Sarah Collins, Richard confirmed, sliding into one of the leather chairs facing Alex's desk. 3 months behind now. We can't keep making exceptions, son. The market's too tight. Alex moved away from the window and settled into his ergonomic chair, studying the file on his screen. Sarah Collins, 35. Medical bills piling up, working 2 jobs. A familiar story in today's economy, but business was business. His father had taught him that lesson early on. Have you seen her latest payment proposal? Alex asked, though he already knew the answer. Richard Maxwell never brought up an issue without thoroughly reviewing all aspects first. Unrealistic, Richard replied, his voice carrying the weight of decades of experience. She's promising to catch up with double payments starting next month, but her income doesn't support that claim. We've been more than patient, Alex. 3 months of leniency is already stretching our policies. Alex leaned back, running a hand through his dark hair, a gesture he'd inherited from his father, along with his sharp business acumen. The Maxwell name stood for excellence in Boston's real estate market, built on Richard's unwavering principles and now maintained by Alex's innovative strategies. They managed some of the city's most prestigious properties, and their waiting lists were always full. What about her health situation? Alex asked, remembering the medical documentation Sarah had submitted with her last plea for extension. Richard's expression hardened slightly. We're not a charity, son. You know that. The moment we start making decisions based on personal circumstances, we compromise the entire operation. Your mother and I didn't build this company by being sentimental. The mention of his mother, gone for 5 years now, made Alex's chest tighten. Caroline Maxwell had been the epitome of grace and business savvy, the perfect complement to Richard's ambitious drive. She would have handled this situation with her characteristic blend of firmness and compassion. Schedule the eviction notice, Alex finally decided, pushing away the nagging doubt in his mind. But give her 2 weeks instead of the standard one. That's as much flexibility as we can offer. Richard nodded approvingly. I'll have Jennifer prepare the paperwork. He stood, straightening his impeccable suit. By the way, the Riverside Development meeting is at 2. The investors are particularly interested in your new proposal for the community integration project. Alex managed a smile. The Riverside Development was his baby, a revolutionary approach to luxury living that would set new standards in the industry. It was exactly the kind of project that had earned him recognition as one of Boston's most promising young entrepreneurs. As his father left the office, Alex turned back to the windows, watching the city buzz with morning activity. From his vantage point, people looked like tiny figures moving through a perfectly orchestrated dance, each with their own stories, their own struggles. He pushed the thought of Sarah Collins aside, focusing instead on the presentations he needed to prepare for the afternoon meeting. Later that morning, while reviewing the Lawrence Street property files, Alex found himself studying Sarah Collins's application from 2 years ago. Single mother, excellent references from her previous landlord, steady job at the time as a medical assistant. Everything had looked promising until her health issues began affecting her work attendance. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Maxwell, your father asked me to remind you about lunch with the board members at Le Petit Bistro. Jennifer's voice came through. Thank you, Jennifer. I'll be heading out shortly. Alex closed the file on his computer, but Sarah Collins's situation lingered in his mind. Something about this case felt different. though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. As he gathered his things for lunch, he glanced at the family photo on his desk. Himself, his father, and his mother at his graduation from Harvard Business School. Caroline Maxwell's proud smile seemed to hold a hint of something else today, something that made him inexplicably uneasy. "It's just business," he muttered to himself, echoing his father's lifelong mantra. But as he stepped into the elevator, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this particular business decision would have consequences he couldn't yet foresee. Sarah Collins stood in her small kitchen, studying the eviction notice with trembling hands. The Maxwell Properties letterhead seemed to mock her from the counter as she reached for her morning medication. The bottle was almost empty, another expense she'd have to juggle soon. Through her apartment window, she could see the city awakening, the same view she'd grown to love over the past 2 years. The thought of leaving this sanctuary, this home she'd created for herself despite all odds, made her chest tighten with anxiety. "Mom?" Emily's voice called from the hallway. "Are you okay?" Sarah quickly wiped her eyes and turned to face her 12-year-old daughter. Emily stood in her school uniform, her backpack slung over one shoulder, dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She looked so much like her father, a thought Sarah usually tried to suppress. "I'm fine, sweetie, just reviewing some paperwork." Sarah forced a smile. "Did you finish your breakfast?" Emily nodded, her perceptive eyes falling on the official document. "Is it about the rent again?" Sometimes Sarah wished her daughter wasn't quite so observant. At 12, Emily already understood too much about adult problems, about struggle and sacrifice. It wasn't the childhood Sarah had wanted for her, but life had its own plans. "Don't worry about that," Sarah assured her, tucking the notice into her purse. "We've got 2 weeks to figure things out. Now, isn't today your big presentation in history class?" Before Emily could respond, a knock at the door interrupted them. Their neighbor, Michael Chen, stood in the hallway with his usual friendly smile. At 28, Michael had become an unofficial guardian angel to them over the past year, often checking in and helping with small repairs around the apartment. "Morning, Collins ladies. Emily, ready for school?" "Lisa's waiting downstairs with the car." Lisa Martinez, Michael's girlfriend, had started carpooling Emily to school with her younger sister 3 months ago, when Sarah's health made the morning routine increasingly difficult. The young couple's kindness still overwhelmed Sarah at times. "Thanks, Michael," Sarah smiled warmly. "Emily, don't forget your lunch." As Emily grabbed her lunchbox and headed out, Michael lingered in the doorway. "Everything okay? You look a bit pale today." Sarah hesitated. Michael worked in real estate too, though for a smaller agency across town. He understood the market, the systems, the seemingly inflexible rules. "They're giving us 2 weeks," she finally admitted, gesturing to her purse where the notice lay hidden. Michael's expression darkened. "Maxwell Properties?" When Sarah nodded, he ran a hand through his short black hair. "Those guys are known for being ruthless. The son's supposed to be bringing in all these innovative ideas, but at the core, they're still all about the bottom line." "Alexander Maxwell," Sarah murmured, remembering the signature on the notice. She'd never met him, but his father, Richard Maxwell, had interviewed her when she first applied for the apartment. There had been something familiar about him that she couldn't quite place, something in his mannerisms that tugged at old memories. "Listen," Michael said, pulling her from her thoughts. "I might know some people who could help. There are programs, assistance options. Let me ask around, okay?" Sarah felt tears threatening again. "You and Lisa have already done so much." "Hey, that's what neighbors are for," Michael interrupted with a gentle smile. "Besides, Emily's the best math tutor my sister could ask for. We're just evening the score." After Michael left, Sarah found herself drawn to the small box she kept in her bedroom closet. Inside, beneath old photographs and documents, lay a worn envelope containing a single photograph, herself as a baby, held by her mother, with a man whose face had been carefully cut out of the picture. Her mother had never told her his name, taking that secret with her when she passed away 15 years ago. The morning light caught the silver frame on her bedside table, a recent photo of Emily at her school science fair. The same proud smile, the same determined set of the jaw. Sarah had noticed it years ago, but pushed the thought away. Now, with the eviction notice burning a hole in her purse and her options running out, she couldn't help but wonder about the missing piece of her past. Her phone buzzed, a reminder for her shift at the diner. Her second job, on top of her part-time medical filing work, barely kept them afloat even before her health took a turn. The medical bills from her autoimmune condition had devoured their savings, and now? Sarah grabbed her uniform and name tag, pushing aside the growing despair. 2 weeks. She had 2 weeks to figure something out. As she locked her apartment door, she caught a glimpse of the Maxwell Properties logo on the building directory in the lobby. Something about that name, about Richard Maxwell's familiar features, kept nagging at her mind. The autumn wind whipped around her as she waited for the bus, carrying the scent of approaching rain. Somewhere across the city, in their gleaming office tower, the Maxwells were probably starting their day with expensive coffee and million-dollar deals. They had no idea who she really was. Or did they? The question that had haunted her for years surfaced again. Was her father out there somewhere, living his life, not knowing about her? Or worse, knowing but choosing to stay away? The bus arrived, its brakes squealing against the morning traffic. Sarah boarded, finding a seat near the window. As the city streamed by, she made a decision. Before these 2 weeks were up, she would find out the truth about her past. She owed it to Emily, and to herself, to finally uncover the secrets her mother had taken to her grave. Lisa Martinez stormed into Michael's apartment that evening, her real estate agency ID still swinging from her neck. "You won't believe what I just heard at work," she announced, finding Michael at his laptop, surrounded by property listings. "Remember that big development project I mentioned? Guess who's behind it?" Michael looked up from his work. "The Riverside development? That's Maxwell Properties, isn't it?" "Exactly." Lisa dropped onto the couch, kicking off her heels. "And guess what their marketing angle is? Community-focused luxury living." The irony is killing me, considering what they're doing to Sarah. Michael closed his laptop and joined her on the couch. "I've been researching assistance programs all day. There might be some options, but most have waiting lists." He rubbed his temples in frustration. 2 weeks isn't much time. "I saw Emily today during drop-off," Lisa said softly. "She's such a bright kid. Did you know she's top of her class in mathematics?" "Sarah mentioned it during one of our coffee mornings. She works so hard to give that girl every opportunity." The sound of rain against the windows filled the momentary silence between them. Michael stood and walked to his desk, pulling out a folder. "I've been thinking about something. Remember that entry-level broker position that opened up at my agency?" Lisa's eyes widened. "For Sarah? But she doesn't have any real estate experience." "No, but she has medical office experience, and honestly, her people skills are amazing. I've seen her handle difficult situations at the diner with such grace." Michael began pacing, his energy building as he explained his idea. "The base salary would be better than both her current jobs combined, and the healthcare benefits are solid. Plus, flexible hours would mean more time with Emily." "That's actually brilliant." Lisa sat up straighter. "But would Gordon hire her?" "Gordon trusts my judgment. He's been asking me to recommend someone for weeks." Michael paused, a determined look crossing his face. "I'm meeting him for lunch tomorrow. I'm going to make it happen." Just then, a knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Michael opened it to find Sarah standing there, still in her diner uniform, looking exhausted. "I'm so sorry to bother you," she started, her voice shaking slightly. "But Emily's science project is due tomorrow, and my printer—" "Say no more." Michael stepped aside to let her in. "Mi printer es su printer." Lisa was already moving to the kitchen. "I'm making tea. You're joining us. No arguments." 20 minutes later, the three of them sat around Michael's small dining table, Emily's project prints laying forgotten as Sarah finally let her brave facade crack. "I don't know what to do," she admitted, cradling her teacup. "I've applied for every assistance program I could find, picked up extra shifts at the diner, even tried selling some furniture online." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "But it's not just about the money. There's something I need to figure out." Michael and Lisa exchanged glances. "What do you mean?" Lisa asked gently. Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out an old photograph. "This is me and my mom when I was a baby. The man in the picture, well, what's left of him." She pointed to the carefully cut-out space. That's my father. My mom never told me who he was, just that he was already married when they met, that he had another family. Lisa leaned closer to examine the photo. And you think... I don't know what I think anymore, Sarah confessed. But when Richard Maxwell interviewed me for the apartment 2 years ago, something about him felt familiar. The way he gestures when he talks, the way he signs his name. I've caught Emily making those exact same movements. Michael's expression turned thoughtful. Richard Maxwell does have a reputation for complicated relationships. There were rumors years ago, but nothing concrete ever came out. The timing would fit, Lisa mused, mental calculations running behind her eyes. Sarah, have you ever tried to... No, Sarah cut her off firmly. My mother made me promise never to go looking for him. She said it would only cause pain for everyone involved. I've respected that promise for 35 years. She touched the photograph gently. But now, with Emily's future at stake, Michael suddenly stood up, an idea forming. Sarah, what if I told you there might be a way to change your situation completely? A new job, better pay, benefits. As Michael outlined his proposal about the broker position, Lisa watched Sarah's expression shift from skepticism to cautious hope. But there was something else there too, a determination that hadn't been present before. You'd really recommend me? Sarah asked, her voice small but steady. In a heartbeat, Michael assured her. You're smart, you're great with people, and you've got more real-world experience than half the recent graduates we usually get. Let me at least try. Sarah looked down at the photograph once more before carefully returning it to her bag. Okay, she nodded. Okay, but I want to learn everything, not just about being a broker, but about the whole industry, about how companies like Maxwell Properties operate. As Sarah left that evening, armed with Emily's printed project and a renewed sense of purpose, Lisa turned to Michael. She's going to investigate, isn't she? Michael nodded, gathering the empty teacups. Wouldn't you, in her position? He paused, considering. You know, if Sarah's suspicions are right, this could get really complicated. It's already complicated, Lisa pointed out. But maybe that's not a bad thing. The Maxwells have this perfect image, this sterling reputation. A little complication might be exactly what they need. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, leaving the city streets glistening under the streetlights. From Michael's window, they could see Sarah walking back to her apartment, her head held higher than it had been in weeks. Sometimes, they both knew, the biggest changes started with the smallest moments of courage. Alexander Maxwell sat in his father's home office, surrounded by the familiar scent of leather-bound books and success. The evening light filtered through the large bay windows, casting long shadows across the room's expensive furnishings. Richard Maxwell stood by his prized collection of vintage photographs, each one documenting a milestone in the company's history. The board meeting went well today, Alex commented, loosening his tie. The Riverside development is generating a lot of buzz. Richard nodded absently, his attention fixed on an old photograph. Your mother would have been proud of how you've grown the company. He paused, his hand lingering on the frame. She always had a vision for what Maxwell Properties could become. Something in his father's tone made Alex look up. Richard seemed different lately, more contemplative, less certain of the rigid principles he'd always preached. Dad, is everything okay? Just thinking about legacy, Richard replied, finally turning to face his son. About the choices we make, the paths not taken. He moved to his desk, opening a drawer Alex had never seen him use before. There's something I've been meaning to discuss with you. Before he could continue, his phone buzzed. Richard checked the screen, and his expression hardened. Jennifer says Sarah Collins is requesting a meeting. Apparently, she's acquired a position at Chen & Associates Real Estate. Alex raised an eyebrow. Michael Chen's company? The boutique agency across town? This changes nothing, Richard stated firmly, closing the drawer with more force than necessary. 2 weeks is 2 weeks. Business is business. Across the city, in a modest office building, Michael was showing Sarah around her new workplace. Gordon was impressed with your interview, he said, helping her set up her desk. Your experience with medical documentation actually worked in your favor. He says attention to detail is crucial in this business. Sarah ran her hand along the desktop, still hardly believing this opportunity had materialized. I can't thank you enough, Michael. This is... Hey, you earned this, he interrupted. Now, first lesson in real estate. Research is everything. He pulled up a chair beside her computer. Let's start with the basics of property records and public databases. As Michael walked her through the systems, Sarah's attention was caught by a news article featuring Richard Maxwell at a charity gala from 15 years ago. The photo showed him with his wife Caroline, both of them beaming at the camera. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. The woman's smile was hauntingly familiar. Can you show me how to access historical records? Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Hours later, after Michael had left for the day, Sarah sat alone at her desk, staring at her findings. Caroline Maxwell had been a prominent figure in Boston's social scene, known for her charity work and business acumen. She had passed away 5 years ago after a lengthy illness. But it was another detail that made Sarah's hands tremble. Caroline and Richard had lived in the same neighborhood where Sarah's mother had worked as a nurse in the late 1980s. Sarah pulled out her mother's old photo, studying it in the dim office light. The date stamp on the back read September 1988. She quickly cross-referenced it with public records. Richard and Caroline Maxwell had purchased their first home in that neighborhood in March of that same year. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. Emily's helping Rosa with math homework. Take your time. We've got dinner covered. Sarah smiled, grateful once again for her neighbor's support. She was about to pack up when she noticed something in another article about the Maxwells. It was a casual mention of Richard's habit of wearing a specific type of vintage watch, the same kind her mother had kept hidden in a small box, claiming it was a reminder of mistakes best forgotten. The next morning, Alex found himself distracted during the daily property review. His father's unusual behavior the previous evening kept replaying in his mind. The drawer, the unfinished conversation about legacy. Mr. Maxwell? Jennifer's voice interrupted his thoughts. There's something you should see. She handed him a file. I was organizing the Lawrence Street property records and found some inconsistencies in the original tenant screening for Unit 4B. Alex opened the file, scanning the documents. What inconsistencies? The initial background check on Sarah Collins. Some of the dates don't match up. And... Jennifer hesitated. Your father's notes from her interview are unusually detailed. He spent nearly 2 hours with her, according to the visitor log. Standard interviews never last more than 30 minutes. Alex stared at his father's handwriting, noticing how it grew increasingly unsteady as the notes progressed. The final page contained a single line, written and crossed out multiple times. The resemblance is unmistakable. Thank you, Jennifer, Alex said quietly. Could you pull everything we have on the Lawrence Street property? And see if you can find my mother's old diaries in the storage room. She used to keep detailed records of all our property acquisitions. As Jennifer left, Alex walked to the window. From his office, he could see the building where Sarah Collins lived, where she would live for just 11 more days, unless something changed. His father's words about legacy and choices echoed in his mind. In her new office, Sarah was reviewing property listings when an email notification popped up. Someone had accessed her tenant file at Maxwell Properties. The system automatically notified tenants of such activities, a feature she hadn't known about until Michael's training session yesterday. She clicked on the notification. Alexander Maxwell had requested her complete file, including all notes from her initial interview. Sarah's heart raced as she opened a new browser tab and typed in a search. Caroline Maxwell, plus Boston General Hospital, plus 1988. The pieces were starting to fall into place, forming a picture that both terrified and empowered her. After 35 years, the truth was finally within reach. But as she stared at the search results loading on her screen, Sarah wondered if some truths were better left in the past. Her phone buzzed again, a text from Emily. Mom, guess what? I got an A+ on my science project. Mr. Peterson says I should consider entering the state competition. Sarah smiled through tears. No, she decided. The past couldn't stay buried anymore. Not when her daughter's future hung in the balance. Not when every new piece of evidence pointed to a connection that could change everything. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out a business card Michael had given her that morning. The embossed letters caught the light. Maxwell Properties, Alexander Maxwell, CEO. On the back, Michael had scribbled a note. Sometimes the direct approach is best. Sarah took a deep breath and reached for her phone. It was time to request that meeting. The leather-bound diary sat on Alex's desk like a time bomb. Jennifer had found it buried in a box of his mother's personal effects, tucked away in the company's storage room. The pages were slightly yellowed, but Caroline Maxwell's elegant handwriting remained clear and precise. Alex traced his fingers over the embossed date, 1988. "I've canceled your afternoon appointments," Jennifer said softly from the doorway. "And your father is in meetings downtown until evening." Alex nodded, grateful for her intuition. "Thank you, Jennifer. Hold all calls, please." As the door closed behind her, Alex opened the diary with trembling hands. His mother had always been meticulous about documentation, treating her personal journals as if they were legal records. He'd never understood why, until now. March 15th, 1988, he began reading. "Richard insists the new house in Beacon Hill is a smart investment. The neighborhood is perfect, close to Boston General where that young nurse Helen works. I pretend not to notice how often he mentions her name." Alex's heart began to race. He flipped forward several pages. "June 2nd, 1988. I saw them today. I wasn't supposed to be at the hospital, but I had to know. Helen is beautiful, young, everything I'm not. The way Richard looks at her, I haven't seen that look in years. But I can't lose him. I won't. The company is finally taking off, and Alex needs his father." The words blurred as Alex continued reading. His mother's elegant script documented a painful summer of suspicions and discoveries. Then he reached an entry that made his blood run cold. September 30th, 1988. Helen is pregnant. She came to the house today, crying, desperate. Richard wasn't home. I should have turned her away, but something in her eyes. She didn't know Richard was married when they met. "She's leaving town," she says. "Doesn't want to destroy our family." I offered her money, but she refused. She only asked that I never tell Richard about the baby. I agreed. What choice did I have? This secret will be my cross to bear. A knock at the door startled Alex. Jennifer stood there, looking apologetic. "I'm sorry, Mr. Maxwell, but Ms. Collins is here for her appointment." Alex closed the diary, his mind spinning. "Show her in, please." Sarah Collins entered his office with quiet dignity. She looked different from her tenant file photo, more confident, despite the circumstances. She wore a broker's name badge from Chen and Associates. "Thank you for meeting with me, Mr. Maxwell," she began, but Alex cut her off. "Please, sit down." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "I understand you found new employment. Congratulations." Sarah settled into the chair, her eyes briefly catching sight of the diary on his desk. "Yes, thank you. Michael Chen has been very supportive." "Ms. Collins." Alex leaned forward, studying her face with new awareness. "Why did you really request this meeting?" Sarah took a deep breath. "I recently began researching property records as part of my training. I found some interesting connections." She paused, gathering courage. "Mr. Maxwell, did you know that your father spent 2 hours interviewing me for my apartment? That's unusual, isn't it?" Alex's hand unconsciously moved to the diary. "Go on." "I have a photograph," Sarah continued, reaching into her bag. "My mother kept it hidden for years. The man's face is cut out, but..." She placed the photo on his desk. Alex stared at the image. The woman holding the baby wore a nurse's uniform from Boston General. The date stamp matched his mother's diary entries perfectly. "Your mother's name was Helen Collins?" he asked quietly. Sarah nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "She never told me my father's name, just that he was married, that he had another family. She passed away 15 years ago, taking her secrets with her. But lately I've started noticing things. The way your father gestures when he talks. The way my daughter Emily signs her name." Alex opened the diary again, turning to the September entry. Without a word, he pushed it across the desk toward Sarah. As she read, tears began rolling down her cheeks. "She knew," Sarah whispered. Your mother knew about me. She protected everyone, Alex said, his voice rough with emotion. You, your mother, our family's reputation. She carried this secret for years. I never intended to disrupt anyone's life, Sarah said quickly. I didn't even plan to investigate until the eviction notice came. But Emily, she's so bright, so full of potential. I couldn't bear the thought of uprooting her life without at least trying to understand our past. Alex stood and walked to the window, his world tilting on its axis. All those years of watching his father and mother at charity events, business functions, family dinners. The perfect power couple, the pillars of Boston society. How many other secrets lay buried beneath that polished surface? The eviction notice, he said suddenly, turning back to Sarah. 2 weeks wasn't your idea, was it, Dad? Richard Maxwell stood in the doorway, his face ashen. Behind him, Jennifer wrung her hands nervously. I'm sorry, Mr. Maxwell. He insisted on coming up when he heard Ms. Collins was here. Alex watched as his father stared at Sarah, really looked at her for the first time since that interview 2 years ago. You knew, Alex accused. You knew the moment you interviewed her. I suspected, Richard admitted, his voice barely audible. She looked so much like Helen. But I convinced myself it was impossible. Helen promised she'd left Boston. Mom knew, Alex held up the diary. She knew everything. She protected your secret, protected your reputation, while this woman, my sister, grew up without a father. Sarah stood, gathering her things with shaking hands. I should go. No, Alex said firmly. You're not going anywhere. None of us are leaving this room until we face the truth. All of it. Richard sank into a chair, looking suddenly old and vulnerable. Sarah remained standing, caught between flight and confrontation. And Alex, still holding his mother's diary, felt the weight of 3 decades of secrets pressing down on all of them. The sun was setting over Boston, casting long shadows through the office windows. In the gathering darkness, 3 people bound by blood and betrayal faced each other, while the words of a long-gone woman waited to reveal even more truths in the pages of her diary. The silence in Alex's office felt suffocating. Richard Maxwell sat with his head in his hands, while Sarah remained frozen near the door. Alex stood between them, his mother's diary still open on his desk, its pages filled with 30-year-old secrets now laid bare. Why didn't you look for us? Sarah's voice finally broke the silence, years of suppressed pain bleeding through her carefully maintained composure. Did you ever wonder about your child? Richard lifted his head, his face etched with visible anguish. Helen told me she had lost the baby. When she left Boston, that's what she said. I never knew. He turned to Alex. Your mother, she protected you, Alex cut in, his voice sharp. Like she always did. Did you even deserve it, Dad? Sarah moved closer to the desk, her hands trembling as she reached for the photograph she'd brought. My mother raised me alone. She worked double shifts at hospitals, took extra nursing duties, anything to give me a good life. She never asked for anything from you. And now? Richard asked, his voice barely a whisper. What do you want now? I wanted the truth, Sarah replied simply. I wanted to understand why my daughter sometimes makes the same gestures you do. Why she has your mother's smile. She paused, gathering strength. I never planned to disrupt your lives. But when the eviction notice came, Alex picked up the eviction paperwork from his desk, staring at it with new eyes. You interviewed her personally for the apartment, Dad. You must have suspected then. Did you approve her application out of guilt? I told myself it was impossible, Richard repeated, but his voice wavered. The resemblance was shocking, but Helen had been clear about. I convinced myself it was just a coincidence. A coincidence? Alex's laugh was bitter. Like it's a coincidence that my sister Dad, is about to be evicted from her home by our company, while we sit in our glass tower discussing community-focused luxury living for the Riverside development. Sarah watched the exchange, emotions warring on her face. I should go, she said again, but Alex shook his head. No, we need to deal with this. All of it. He turned to his father. Mom knew about Sarah from the beginning. She helped protect your reputation, the company's image. She carried that burden alone. Caroline, Richard's voice broke. She was extraordinary. She was hurt, Alex corrected, lifting the diary. Every page of this shows how much your betrayal wounded her. But she stayed. She protected you. She even protected Sarah and her mother. While you just… what? Pretended nothing had happened? Sarah moved to the window, watching the city lights begin to twinkle in the gathering dusk. I have a daughter too, she said softly. Emily, your granddaughter. She's 12, brilliant at mathematics, dreams of becoming an engineer. She turned back to face them. I've never told her anything about her grandfather. I wanted to protect her from feeling unwanted. The word grandfather seemed to hit Richard physically. He stood abruptly, walking to the family photos arranged on Alex's credenza. I never knew, he repeated. If I had known, would it have made a difference? Alex challenged. Would you have acknowledged them, supported them, or would you have just thrown money at the situation to make it go away? Alex, Sarah interrupted gently, I didn't come here for money. I came here because Emily deserves to know her family history, the good and the bad, because secrets like this have a way of surfacing eventually. Because, she hesitated, then continued, because despite everything, we're family. The word hung in the air between them. Family. The thing Richard had tried to protect by denying Sarah's existence. The thing Caroline had sacrificed her peace of mind to preserve. The thing Alex had thought he understood until today. The eviction notice is cancelled, Alex declared suddenly. And we're going to figure out a proper arrangement for Sarah and Emily. Alex, Sarah began to protest, but he held up his hand. Not out of guilt, not as charity, but because it's right, because we're family. He turned to his father. Unless you have any objections? Richard looked between his two children, the son he'd raised and the daughter he'd never known, and something in his rigid demeanor finally cracked. I've spent 30 years building this company, protecting our reputation, trying to create a legacy. But looking at you both now, he sank back into his chair. I've been a fool. Yes, Alex agreed quietly. You have been. He picked up his phone. Jennifer, please come in and bring the Lawrence Street property files. As Jennifer entered with the files, Alex noticed how the setting sun cast long shadows across the office floor, like fingers of the past reaching into the present. Sarah remained by the window, her silhouette reminding him painfully of his mother's photographs. We're going to make this right, Alex said, his voice firm with determination. Starting now. He began pulling out papers from the file. But first, we need to talk about Emily. Tell us about our niece, Sarah. Tell us everything. Outside the Maxwell Properties building, the city continued its evening rhythm, unaware that in a corner office high above the streets, 3 people were beginning the complicated process of reconstructing a family fractured by decades of secrets and silence. 3 days after the revelations in Alex's office, Richard Maxwell collapsed during a board meeting. The prestigious boardroom at Maxwell Properties erupted into chaos as emergency services were called. Alex, presenting the latest Riverside development updates, watched helplessly as paramedics rushed his father to Boston General Hospital. Now, sitting in the hospital waiting room, Alex found himself staring at the same institutional walls where, decades ago, his father had first met Helen Collins. Life had a way of coming full circle. Mr. Maxwell, a nurse approached him. Your father is stable. The stroke was moderate, but he'll need extensive rehabilitation. We've completed the initial assessments. Alex nodded mechanically, his mind racing. Can I see him? He's resting now, but yes. Just… The nurse hesitated. Be prepared. There's some paralysis on his right side and his speech is affected. The ICU room was eerily quiet except for the steady beeping of monitors. Richard Maxwell, the titan of Boston real estate, looked small and vulnerable in the hospital bed. His right side was motionless, and his usually sharp eyes seemed confused. Dad, Alex said softly, approaching the bed. I'm here. Richard's left hand moved slightly, reaching out. His mouth worked, trying to form words, but only fragments emerged. Sorry, he managed finally, tears sliding down his cheeks. Don't try to talk, Alex urged, taking his father's hand. Just rest." A gentle knock at the door made them both look up. Sarah stood there, still wearing her broker's badge from Chen & Associates. "I heard what happened," she said quietly. "I was actually here dropping off some paperwork for Emily's medical insurance when I saw the commotion in the ER. Richard's monitors showed a spike in heart rate. His eyes fixed on Sarah, and his left hand tightened around Alex's. "It's okay, Dad," Alex assured him. "Sarah should be here. She's family." Sarah moved into the room, her nursing background evident in the way she automatically checked the monitors and IV lines. "The stroke unit here is excellent," she said, her professional knowledge mixing with personal concern. "I still know some of the staff from when I did my clinical rotations." Richard's eyes followed her movements, and again he struggled to speak. "Helen," he managed, "would have forgiven you." Sarah completed softly. "She did forgive you in the end. She told me before she passed that holding on to anger only hurts ourselves." A new voice from the doorway interrupted them. "I brought coffee and—" "Oh." Emily stood there, holding a carrier with 3 cups, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. She'd come to the hospital to meet her mother after school, as she often did. Richard stared at his granddaughter, seeing her clearly for the first time. The same determined jaw, the same analytical gaze that 3 generations of Maxwells had possessed. "Emily," Sarah said carefully, "this is Richard Maxwell, your grandfather." Emily's intelligence was evident in how quickly she processed this information. She looked between her mother, Alex, and the man in the hospital bed, making connections. "The eviction notice," she said slowly. "That's why you've been so worried. We're related to them?" "Yes, sweetheart," Sarah confirmed. "It's complicated, but—" "Is he going to be okay?" Emily interrupted, surprising everyone with her immediate concern for a man she'd just learned was her grandfather. "He'll need time to recover," Alex explained, watching his father's face as Emily approached the bed, "and help with rehabilitation." "I'm good at helping people learn things," Emily offered, setting down the coffee carrier. "I tutor Rosa in math. Maybe I could help somehow." Richard's eyes filled with tears again, and his left hand reached toward Emily. She took it without hesitation, her young face serious and compassionate. "Nice to meet you, grandfather," she said formally, then broke into a small smile. "Even if the circumstances are kind of weird." Sarah watched the interaction with mixed emotions, remembering all the times Emily had asked about her father's family, all the questions she'd had to deflect. Now, in this sterile hospital room, those walls were finally coming down. "The doctor mentioned he'll need home care," Alex said, looking at Sarah. "A medical professional who understands stroke rehabilitation." "I might know someone," Sarah replied, understanding his unspoken question. "A former colleague who specializes in stroke recovery. Very professional, very discreet." "Actually," Alex hesitated, then continued, "I was thinking of you. You have the medical background, you know how to handle confidential situations, and—" He glanced at their father. "Maybe it's time to make up for lost years." Richard made an urgent sound, his left hand squeezing Emily's as he tried to communicate. Emily, showing wisdom beyond her years, seemed to understand. "He's nodding," she reported. "I think he likes that idea." Sarah stared at her half-brother, then at her father. "I have the new job at Chen & Associates," she began. "Part-time," Alex suggested. "We can work around your schedule. The company will cover everything, of course." He managed a small smile. "Consider it 35 years of back pay." Emily tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mom, we could help. I could do my homework there after school and maybe—" She looked at Alex shyly. "Maybe get to know my uncle too." The monitors showed Richard's heart rate elevating again. But this time the nurse who checked didn't seem concerned. "Happy tears," she explained, adjusting his pillows. "They're good for healing." As the evening settled over Boston, the small group remained in the hospital room, beginning the delicate process of becoming a family. Emily had pulled out her math homework, occasionally showing problems to her grandfather, who would blink once for correct answers and twice for mistakes. Sarah and Alex sat by the window, quietly discussing logistics and years of missing history. Outside, the city lights twinkled against the darkening sky, while inside room 742, the walls built by decades of secrets continued to crumble, replaced by something stronger. the foundations of truth, forgiveness, and new beginnings. The rehabilitation center's private wing echoed with the steady rhythm of physical therapy equipment. 2 weeks had passed since Richard's stroke, and his progress, though slow, was promising. Sarah adjusted his pillows with professional efficiency, while Emily read aloud from her science textbook, their new afternoon routine. The circumference of a circle is calculated by... Emily's voice trailed off as the door burst open. "Richard, darling." An elegantly dressed woman in her 40s swept into the room, her designer heels clicking against the tile floor. "I just heard. I was in Europe and completely disconnected from everything." Sarah straightened, instantly alert. Richard's heart monitor showed a spike in his readings. "I'm sorry," Sarah said professionally, "but Mr. Maxwell is not supposed to have unexpected visitors. It can be stressful for his recovery." The woman barely glanced at her. "Oh, you must be the new nurse. I'm Victoria Sinclair. Richard and I have been close friends for the past year. Very close." She moved toward the bed, her expensive perfume overwhelming the sterile hospital scent. Emily looked between Victoria and her grandfather, noting how Richard's left hand had clenched into a fist. "Ms. Sinclair," Sarah began again, but Victoria cut her off. "Please, dear, just bring us some fresh water and give us some privacy. Richard and I have so much to discuss." She opened her designer handbag, pulling out some papers, including some investment opportunities we were exploring before this unfortunate incident. The door opened again, and Alex entered with Michael Chen, who had become a regular visitor during Richard's recovery. "Victoria!" Alex's voice was ice cold. What an unexpected surprise. Victoria turned, her practiced smile faltering slightly. "Alex, darling, I came as soon as I heard. Your father and I have some unfinished business to discuss." "The only unfinished business," Alex replied, "is the transfer of funds you attempted to initiate last week." "Did you really think we wouldn't notice?" Victoria's smile disappeared completely. "I don't know what you're talking about. Richard and I had several joint ventures planned. He gave me authorization." "Before or after his stroke?" Michael asked quietly, pulling out his phone. "Because according to the timestamp on these documents, they were submitted 3 days after he was hospitalized." Sarah watched the scene unfold, her nurse's training keeping her focused on Richard's vital signs. His readings were elevated, but not dangerously so. If anything, he seemed more alert than usual, his eyes fixed on Victoria with a new clarity. "Richard," Victoria turned back to the bed, her voice honey-sweet. "Darling, tell them about our plans." "About everything we discussed." Richard's left hand moved deliberately to the communication board Sarah had created for him. With effort, he pointed to letters, spelling out a single word. "Leave." "But sweetheart." Victoria's voice took on a desperate edge. "Think about everything we've shared. The future we planned." "The only future you planned," Alex interrupted, "was with our company's assets. Did you really think we wouldn't investigate? That we wouldn't find the other attempts? The other men?" Emily, who had been quietly observing, suddenly spoke up. "You're not very good at math, are you?" Everyone turned to look at her. Victoria blinked, thrown off balance. "Excuse me?" "The documents you submitted," Emily continued, her young face serious. "I saw them on Uncle Alex's desk yesterday. The numbers don't add up. The percentages are all wrong, and you didn't account for compound interest properly." A surprised laugh escaped Michael, quickly turned into a cough. Sarah felt a surge of pride in her daughter's sharp mind. "Out of the mouths of babes," Alex said softly, then hardened his voice. "Security is waiting downstairs, Victoria. They'll escort you out. If you attempt to contact anyone in the Maxwell family again, our lawyers will be in touch." Victoria's sophisticated facade cracked. "You can't do this to me." "Richard and I had an understanding. An understanding based on lies," Sarah finally spoke up, moving to stand between Victoria and her father's bed. "You know what real understanding looks like? It looks like forgiveness, like family coming together despite past mistakes. Like a 12-year-old girl reading science homework to her grandfather because she knows it helps him stay focused during therapy." Richard's hand found Emily's, squeezing it gently. His other hand reached for Sarah. Victoria looked between them, realization dawning in her eyes. "Who are you people?" "We're his family," Emily answered simply. "His real family." Security arrived, their presence professional but firm. As they led Victoria away, her protests echoed down the hallway, growing fainter until finally fading completely. Michael closed the door behind them, letting out a low whistle. Well, that was dramatic. "Welcome to the Maxwell family," Alex said dryly. But there was warmth in his voice as he looked at Sarah and Emily. Richard was trying to communicate again, his hand moving to the letterboard. Slowly, laboriously, he spelled out, "Proud of all." Sarah checked his vitals one more time, adjusting his medication drip. "Your numbers are actually better now," she reported, surprised. Sometimes confronting the truth head-on is the best medicine. "Speaking of truth," Michael said, pulling up a chair, "I brought those property documents you asked for, Alex. The ones about restructuring the Lawrence Street building's management." Emily returned to her textbook, but now she read loud enough for everyone to hear, her clear voice washing away the last traces of Victoria's expensive perfume. Richard's vital signs settled into a steady rhythm as his family gathered around him, their presence a shield against any future storms. Outside the window, Boston's fall colors painted the trees in brilliant hues of change. Inside, a family forged in difficult truths continued to grow stronger, while the echoes of false promises faded into insignificance. Sarah stood in Richard's home study, surrounded by decades of family history. The rehabilitation center had cleared him for home care, and now decisions needed to be made. The grand house felt both imposing and oddly familiar, as if echoes of her mother's brief time here still lingered in its walls. "The in-home care service can start next week," Alex said, reviewing paperwork at their father's desk. "They're very highly recommended, but it's not the same as family," Sarah completed, running her fingers along the spines of leather-bound books. She paused at a collection of photo albums, carefully arranged by year. "Have you thought about my offer?" Alex looked up, studying his half-sister's face. "Sarah, you don't owe him this. After everything, this isn't about owing," she interrupted gently. "It's about healing. All of us." She pulled out an album from 1988, opening it to reveal Caroline Maxwell's careful documentation of that fateful year. "Your mother chose forgiveness when she helped mine. Maybe it's time for the next generation to do the same." The door creaked open, and Emily peeked in. "Mom? Grandfather's physical therapist is here for the home assessment. She wants to know if we're still planning to convert the downstairs library into his recovery room." Sarah exchanged glances with Alex. "Actually, sweetheart, we need to talk about some changes." Later that evening, the family gathered in Richard's newly arranged bedroom. The medical equipment had been carefully integrated to maintain the room's dignity while ensuring proper care. Richard sat in his adjustable bed, his left side showing improving mobility, watching as Sarah efficiently organized his medications. "The schedule will be like this," she explained, her nurse's training evident in her clear, confident tone. "I'll be here 3 mornings a week, working with your physical therapist. Emily will come after school those days. She can do her homework in the study. The in-home care service will cover other times, and Alex will handle nights and weekends." Richard's eyes filled with tears as he struggled to speak. Through weeks of therapy, his speech had improved slightly, though words still came with difficulty. "Why?" he managed to ask. Sarah paused in her organizing, meeting her father's gaze. "Because 35 years ago, a woman taught me that bitterness only hurts ourselves. My mother could have chosen anger, could have demanded recognition or support. Instead, she chose to give me a life full of love and possibility." "Helen," Richard whispered, the name carrying decades of regret. "Yes, Helen," Sarah confirmed, "and Caroline. 2 women who could have been enemies but chose a different path. Caroline protected us, helped my mother start fresh somewhere else. She chose family over pride." She moved to Richard's bedside, adjusting his pillows with professional care and personal gentleness. "Now it's our turn to choose." Emily looked up from her math homework, spread out on a small desk in the corner. "Mom says forgiveness is like a really complicated equation," she offered. "It doesn't always make sense at first, but when you work it out step by step, the solution can be beautiful." Alex, who had been quietly observing from the doorway, felt his throat tighten. The past month had transformed his understanding of family, of legacy, of the true meaning of success. The Riverside development plans lay forgotten on his desk downtown, replaced by more important blueprints, those of rebuilding relationships. Sarah, Richard struggled with the words, his determination evident. Emily, stay here. Live here. The offer hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Sarah's hands stilled on the medication bottles. Dad, Alex started, but Sarah held up a hand. Thank you, she said carefully. But no, Emily and I have our home. What we need isn't to live under the same roof. It's to build bridges between our separate lives, to create something new that honors the past while moving forward. Emily nodded vigorously. Besides, we can't leave Michael and Lisa. They're family too, even if not by blood. And Rosa still needs help with trigonometry. Richard's face showed understanding, even as tears slid down his cheeks. His left hand moved to the side table, where Caroline's photo sat beside a new addition, the photograph Sarah had brought that day in Alex's office, now complete with Richard's uncut image. Your mother, he said to Sarah, the words coming slowly but clearly, would be proud of you, of Emily. His eyes moved to Alex. Of all. Sarah finished arranging the medications and sat on the edge of the bed. I found something today while organizing the study. She pulled out a small, worn notebook. It's Caroline's diary from 1989, the year after everything happened. There's an entry I think you should hear. As the evening light softened into dusk, Sarah read Caroline's words aloud. Today I saw Helen and the baby from afar. They looked happy, peaceful. My heart, which I thought would break from this secret, instead feels strangely light. Perhaps love isn't about possession or pride. Perhaps it's about having the courage to let go, to forgive, to trust that the seeds of kindness will someday bloom into something beautiful. Richard closed his eyes, listening. Emily abandoned her homework to curl up beside her grandfather's bed. Alex moved fully into the room, taking a seat by the window where his mother had likely written those words so many years ago. She was right, Sarah said softly, closing the diary. The seeds she planted, protecting us, helping my mother, choosing love over bitterness, they did bloom. They bloomed in Emily's smile, in Alex's commitment to changing the company's values, in our ability to sit here today as a family. Outside, the garden Caroline had loved so much caught the last rays of sunlight, its autumn flowers still blooming against the approaching evening. Inside, her legacy of forgiveness continued to grow, nurturing new possibilities with each passing day. The Maxwell Properties boardroom buzzed with nervous energy. Alex stood at the head of the table, his father's usual seat, facing the assembled board members and senior executives. The quarterly presentation screens behind him showed not just profit margins and growth projections, but something new: community impact assessments and tenant welfare metrics. Ladies and gentlemen, Alex began, his voice steady with conviction, Maxwell Properties has always been about legacy. Today, we're going to redefine what that legacy means. He clicked to the first slide, the Riverside development plans, now dramatically revised. Our flagship project was supposed to be about luxury living. Instead, it's going to be about community integration. 20% of all units will be designated for affordable housing, with priority given to families with medical needs. A murmur of protest rippled through the room. Thomas Bradford, the longest-serving board member, cleared his throat. Alex, while we appreciate your innovative thinking, this is a significant departure from our business model. Our business model needs to evolve, Alex replied firmly. And it's already happening. Chen & Associates has agreed to partner with us on this initiative. The boardroom doors opened, and Michael Chen entered, followed by Sarah. She wore a Maxwell Properties visitor badge, but carried herself with the confidence of someone who belonged. Mr. Chen will be heading our new Community Integration Division, Alex announced. And Sarah Collins, one of his most promising new brokers, will be coordinating with local healthcare facilities to identify families in need of housing assistance. Bradford's face reddened. This is highly irregular. What would your father say about this radical departure from... My father, Alex interrupted, is currently in physical therapy. learning to walk again. He's learning other things too, about family, about legacy, about what really matters. He nodded to Sarah, who activated her presentation on the secondary screen. Our analysis shows that stable housing directly correlates with better health outcomes and community stability, she explained, her medical background lending authority to her words. By integrating affordable units and creating support systems for families facing health challenges, we're not just providing housing, we're building stronger communities. Michael stepped forward, adding, "The pilot program at Lawrence Street has already shown promising results. Tenant retention is up, maintenance costs are down, and community engagement has increased by 40%. Alex watched the board members' expressions shift from skepticism to curiosity. He thought of Emily, who had helped create some of the presentation graphics, applying her mathematical skills to social impact metrics. Her grandfather had beamed with pride when she explained her calculations. "There's more," Alex continued. "We're establishing the Caroline Maxwell Foundation for housing assistance, specifically focused on single-parent families facing medical hardships." He paused, letting the name sink in. "My mother understood that real estate wasn't just about properties. It was about people, about giving them a foundation to build their lives upon." Sarah pulled up the foundation's preliminary charter. "The foundation will work directly with local hospitals and medical facilities, creating a support network that combines housing security with healthcare access. We've already received preliminary commitments from 3 major healthcare providers." Bradford leaned forward, his business instincts engaging despite his initial resistance. "The tax benefits could be substantial, and the publicity value—" "This isn't about publicity," Alex cut in firmly. "This is about doing what's right. About understanding that our true legacy isn't measured in profit margins alone." He clicked to the next slide, a series of photographs showing community events at Maxwell Properties, including one of Emily tutoring other children in the Lawrence Street building's newly established study center. "We're not just landlords," Alex declared. "We're community builders. And yes, Mr. Bradford, we'll still make money, but we'll do it while making a real difference in people's lives." The presentation continued, with Sarah and Michael providing detailed breakdowns of the new initiatives. Alex watched his half-sister command the room with grace and expertise, thinking how proud both their mothers would be. Afterward, as the board members filed out, many stopping to congratulate Sarah on her analysis, Bradford lingered behind. "Your father built this company on certain principles," he began. "Yes," Alex agreed. "Hard work, attention to detail, and understanding the market. We're still following those principles. We're just expanding our definition of success." Bradford nodded slowly. "Caroline would have loved this," he said quietly. "She always said the company needed a heart to match its brain." Later that afternoon, Alex visited his father's home office, where Richard was working through his speech therapy exercises. Emily sat nearby, supposedly doing homework, but actually designing a logo for the Caroline Maxwell Foundation on her tablet. "How did it go?" Richard asked, his speech careful but improving. "The board approved everything," Alex reported, settling into a chair. "The Riverside Development redesign, the foundation, the partnership with Chen & Associates, all of it." "Good," Richard nodded, then pointed to Emily's tablet. "Show him." Emily bounced up, proudly displaying her design. The logo incorporated elements of both the Maxwell Properties emblem and a medical caduceus, unified by an abstract house shape. "It represents how everything's connected," she explained. "Business and family and helping people." Alex studied the design, thinking how this 12-year-old girl had captured in one simple image everything they were trying to achieve. "It's perfect," he said. "Just like Grandmother Caroline would have wanted." Richard's eyes filled with tears. A common occurrence these days, but no longer from regret. Pride, love, and hope had replaced the old sorrows. Sarah arrived later with dinner, their new family tradition on board meeting days. As they gathered in the kitchen, sharing meals and stories and plans for the future, Alex realized that the company wasn't the only thing being transformed. They were all changing, growing, becoming something stronger than their past selves. Through the window, he could see the lights of Boston twinkling on, one by one, each representing a home, a family, a story. Maxwell Properties might own some of those buildings, but their true value lay in the lives lived within them, something his mother had understood all along. The Caroline Maxwell Foundation logo glowed on Emily's tablet, a beacon of new beginnings. Outside, the city hummed with endless possibilities, while inside, a family continued to rebuild, one truth, one change, one act of kindness at a time. The Victorian house on Maple Street stood proudly in the autumn sunlight, its recently restored facade gleaming. Michael Chen stood on the wraparound porch, property portfolio in hand, while Sarah and Emily explored the interior. Alex leaned against the porch railing, watching their expressions through the bay windows. "I still can't believe you're doing this," Michael said, shaking his head in amazement. "Technically, I'm not doing anything," Alex replied with a small smile. "The Caroline Maxwell Foundation is purchasing this property as part of its inaugural housing initiative. You're handling the transaction as our newly appointed Director of Community Integration." Michael adjusted his new Maxwell Properties badge, still getting used to its weight. "And the fact that your sister and niece are the first beneficiaries is perfectly aligned with the Foundation's mission to support single-parent families with medical needs." Alex straightened up, his voice turning serious. "Besides, you've seen the numbers. Sarah's medical bills, even with the new insurance, are substantial. This way, she can focus on her health and her career without worrying about housing stability." Inside, Emily's excited voice echoed through the house. "Mom, this room would be perfect for studying." "The light is amazing!" Sarah appeared in the doorway, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Alex, this is too much. The Foundation's money could help so many other families." "And it will," Alex assured her. "But charity begins at home. Isn't that what Caroline's diary said? She helped you and your mother start fresh once before. Now we're just continuing her legacy." The house was perfect, close to Emily's school, halfway between Maxwell Properties and the medical center where Sarah received her treatments, and most importantly, just a few blocks from Michael and Lisa's apartment. The community that had supported them through everything would remain intact. "There's something else," Alex said, pulling out another folder. "The Foundation's board, which, by the way, would be honored to have you join it, Sarah, has approved a special project. We're converting the carriage house into a community learning center." Emily, who had joined them on the porch, perked up immediately. "Like the study center at Lawrence Street?" "Even better," Michael explained, warming to the idea. "We're thinking of a full-service education support facility. Tutoring programs, college prep resources, health education workshops. And we want you to help design it, Emily," Alex added. "Your grandfather can't stop talking about your gift for organization and numbers. He thinks you could create a really effective program structure." Emily's face lit up with the kind of joy that made her look even more like her grandmother Caroline. "Could we include a science lab? And maybe a computer room for kids who don't have access to technology at home?" Sarah watched her daughter spring into planning mode, already pulling out her tablet to start making notes. The weight of years of struggle, of keeping secrets and making do, seemed to lift from her shoulders. "There's one more thing," Alex said quietly, drawing Sarah aside while Emily enthusiastically described her ideas to Michael. "Dad wants to set up a trust for Emily's education. No strings attached, no public acknowledgement required. Just a grandfather trying to make up for lost time." Sarah's hand found her brother's arm. "He's already doing that, Alex. Every day in therapy, every time he listens to her talk about school or helps her with math problems. That's worth more than any trust fund." "Still," Alex persisted, "he wants to do this, not out of guilt, but out of love. The same way you chose to help with his recovery. Not out of obligation, but because love is stronger than past hurts." Inside the house, Emily's voice carried out to them. "And this space would be perfect for community meetings. Mom, remember how you said sometimes people just need a place to feel like they belong?" Michael was typing furiously on his tablet, trying to keep up with Emily's stream of ideas. "The Foundation could partner with local schools, maybe set up mentorship programs?" "Like you did for me," Emily pointed out, making Michael pause and smile softly. Sarah leaned against the porch railing, taking in the scene. The house seemed to glow in the afternoon light, as if welcoming them home. "You know," she said to Alex, "when I first requested that meeting with you, I never imagined we'd end up here." "Life has a way of surprising us," Alex replied. Mom knew that. Her diaries are full of moments where something that seemed like an ending turned out to be a beginning. The sound of a car pulling up drew their attention. Lisa stepped out, carrying containers of food. "Sorry I'm late, but I brought celebration lunch." She joined them on the porch, greeting Michael with a quick kiss. "So, did they see the garden yet?" "Emily, wait until you see the perfect spot for that herb garden you've been wanting to start." As the group moved through the house again, this time with Lisa pointing out all the possibilities she'd noticed during her previous visit, Alex wasn't surprised to learn she and Michael had already scouted the property thoroughly. Alex hung back, watching. This was what success really looked like, he realized. Not in property portfolios or profit margins, but in the way Emily's laugh echoed through the empty rooms, full of dreams and possibilities. In the way Sarah moved through the space, already planning where family photos would go. In the way Michael and Lisa seamlessly included themselves in these plans, their friendship having weathered the storm of revelations and changes. The house on Maple Street wasn't just a property acquisition. It was a statement of faith in the future, a bridge between past and present, a physical manifestation of Caroline Maxwell's belief that love and forgiveness could build something stronger than bitterness and regret. As the afternoon light painted the walls in warm golden hues, Alex could almost imagine his mother standing there, watching her legacy of love continue to grow and flourish in ways she could never have imagined, but would have wholeheartedly approved. 1 year later, the garden of the Maple Street house bloomed with spring flowers. The Caroline Maxwell Foundation was hosting its first annual community celebration, and the restored Victorian home had become a symbol of everything the foundation stood for. Richard Maxwell sat in his wheelchair on the wide porch, his recovery having plateaued but his spirit stronger than ever. He watched as Emily led groups of children through the newly opened learning center in the converted carriage house, her natural teaching abilities shining as she explained the solar system model they'd built for their science program. "She's just like Caroline," he said to Sarah, his speech now clear though still measured. The same passion for helping others learn. Sarah adjusted his blanket, her medical expertise now perfectly balanced with daughterly affection. "She's like you too, Dad. That determination to get things right, to understand how everything works together." The learning center buzzed with activity. Local families moved between educational stations, while Michael and Lisa managed the registration desk for new community programs. The foundation's logo, Emily's design now professionally refined but maintaining its heart, hung proudly over the entrance. Alex emerged from the main house, where he'd been giving interviews about Maxwell Properties' revolutionary new approach to community-focused development. The Riverside project had become a model for inclusive housing, attracting national attention and inspiring similar initiatives across the country. "The reporters are gone," he announced, joining his family on the porch. "Though they're very interested in doing a follow-up piece on Emily's STEM mentorship program." "My granddaughter," Richard beamed. "The future engineer." Emily bounded up the porch steps, her face flushed with excitement. "Grandfather. Rosa just got accepted into the advanced mathematics program. She says it's all because of our study groups here at the center." "Our girl," Richard reached for her hand. "Building bridges through numbers." Speaking of building, Alex pulled out his tablet. The board just unanimously approved the expansion of the foundation's housing program. 10 new properties next year, all following the Maple Street model. Sarah smiled, remembering the day she'd first walked into Alex's office, carrying an old photograph and a lifetime of questions. "Sometimes the hardest steps lead us exactly where we need to be." Richard's eyes grew misty as he looked between his children. "Alex," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I never told you how proud I am, not just of what you've done with the company, but who you've become. When you discovered the truth," he paused, gathering strength, "you chose to build rather than destroy, to unite rather than divide." "I had good examples," Alex replied softly. "A mother who chose love over bitterness, a sister who chose forgiveness over resentment, a niece who saw possibilities where others saw problems." From the learning center came the sound of children laughing. Lisa was leading a storytelling session, her voice carrying across the garden as she read from a book about family and belonging. Michael sat with a group of teenagers, explaining real estate principles and community development. "You know what I love most about this house?" Emily said suddenly, looking out over the garden. "It's not just our home, it's everyone's home. It's where Rosa learned she could be good at math, where Mr. Jenkins from down the street learned to use a computer to talk to his grandchildren, where Mom's support group meets every Thursday." Sarah wrapped an arm around her daughter. "It's exactly what the foundation is about, creating spaces where people can grow, heal, and connect." Richard reached for both his children's hands. "Caroline," his voice wavered. "She wrote in her diary that love isn't about holding on tight, but about opening your arms wide. I didn't understand then, but now." "We understand, Dad," Alex assured him. "We all do." The afternoon sun painted the scene in warm light, the historic house standing proud and welcoming, the learning center alive with possibility, the garden bursting with new growth. On the porch, 3 generations of Maxwells watched their expanded definition of family move through the space. Neighbors, friends, community members, all connected by something stronger than blood or business. Emily's tablet chimed with a reminder. "Time for the photography session." The Foundation's website needs updated pictures of all the programs. As they gathered for the photos, Richard in his wheelchair surrounded by both his children, Emily orchestrating the perfect arrangement, Michael and Lisa joining what had become their extended family. Alex thought about legacies. Not the kind carved in corporate logos or property deeds, but the kind written in small kindnesses, in choosing love over fear, in turning wounds into wisdom. The photographer counted down. 3, 2, 1. In that frozen moment, with spring sunshine warming their faces and the future bright with promise, they were more than the sum of their past struggles and secrets. They were proof that even the most tangled roots could nurture something beautiful, that forgiveness could build stronger foundations than perfection ever could. The camera flashed, capturing not just a family, but a revolution in love. One that had started with a mother's sacrifice, grown through a daughter's courage, and bloomed in a granddaughter's vision of a world where everyone belonged. Behind them, the Caroline Maxwell Foundation Learning Center welcomed another group of visitors, its doors open wide to all who sought connection, growth, and the simple, profound truth that family isn't just what you're born into, it's what you choose to build, one open heart at a time.